Today on the season premiere of the Wrestling Roundtable, the January 4th Monday Night War, and the best and worst gimmick matches. Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. It's been a few months since we've been on the air, which would be the internet, of course. It's our season premiere for our third season here at the Wrestling Roundtable. I'm your host, Eric Santamaria. Been a fan of wrestling 21 years. Been working in wrestling over 5 now. Everyone's been asking us, what are your thoughts on January 4th? We've been getting your messages, of course, and that's what we're here to talk about to start off the Wrestling Roundtable. But before we get down to business, of course, I hope all of you have joined us on WrestlingRoundtable.com, where you can get the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt in our store. We have a new Amazon store, so if you need to get any new book or DVD, hope you get it through us. And we're also available on iTunes now. Pretty soon, we're also going to be having Wrestling Roundtable Radio coming out, so check WrestlingRoundtable.com for more announcements for that. You can also sign up for our message board and get links to our other sites, MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, etc. But sitting to my left, which is your right, is Rodney LeConte. Been a wrestling fan of also 21 years and also director of the documentary The Grappling Kings coming out in 2010. Sitting to my right, which is your left, is Chris Harris. He's a video and audio engineer and a fan of 18 years. And Martin LeConte, wrestling fan of 15 years and training at Team Oliveira for mixed martial arts. And like I mentioned before, our audience has been asking us what we think of January 4th. Everyone's been talking about it. More people watch January 4th than have watched wrestling in a really long time, because I think it was really catered for people in our age, our demographic, who were trying to relive the Monday Night Wars, which is of course what Nitro, Impact, was attempting to do. So let's just get it right out in the open. What do you guys think about both shows for that night?
For the first time in years, Eric, I actually felt like a wrestling fan. I can't remember the last time where it was 7:57. I was waiting for a wrestling show. I mean, I really felt like I was 15 again, which probably you're 15 right now.
I hope.
Put me back. It really did put me back into being a fan again instead of criticizing everything. And I was excited for what TNA had to bring forth. And they did bring in a lot of people. It almost felt like the Raw 15th anniversary where it was just nostalgia after nostalgia after nostalgia. But in the end, I was all TNA.
Both shows had their ups and downs. Everybody can agree to that. I think Raw was more down, except for the Bret segments. TNA had a lot of good stuff, the match-wise. But it really, to me, it was too much like WCW, but the wallets weren't the only things that were fat this time.
They all put off really good shows. TNA said, okay, this time we're going to compete with Raw. They just went all out.
Well, yeah, different dynamic. First, they're finally, after years and years, after their 2 hours and their Thursday nights, they're like, finally, all right, we're going to go in the direction we need to go, is that to compete and try to steal away from that Monday night audience. I don't necessarily think that they stole away, but they did make regular Raw viewers interested into the other product, and they finally went to the direction they need to go. And you knew just from being a product of the Monday Night Wars that 9 o'clock era is going to be the big money segments. That's when Bret's going to come, and you knew that's when they were building up to Hogan. That was the most interesting part.
Well, funny enough, I agree with you that I was the most interested, as many people were, to watch this night of wrestling than I have in years. I haven't sat down to watch Monday Night Wrestling in years, but I was excited for this, and I enjoyed the old flipping between the channels, seeing what's going to happen on each
I felt
network.
like a little girl when Bret came out, I'm sorry, but I was like, it's Bret Hart!
The shows really weren't that good. And I didn't even notice that until I went online and all you negative Nancys pointed out everything that sucked. And I was like, yeah, it did. But really, as a fan, you're going to ignore, I guess, that terrible opening match with TNA, which was just a complete embarrassment and a bad way to start off the show because even though I'm not a fan, holy shit, they got Jeff Hardy. Holy shit, they got Ric Flair, who probably followed the cocaine trail that Jeff Hardy left leading into the building. But you were like, wow, they really went all out to get these people. And that's what I wanted to get to. Of course, the big selling point for the night on either side was Bret Hart. They did have some big matches with Orton and Kingston in their universe, and the DX Jericho tag match. That's some bigger marquee sort of style matches, but aside from that, they were really resting on Bret Hart, and that's all they needed. Whereas TNA once they had Hogan and they got the wind taken out from underneath them with the Bret Hart stuff, stacked it with all these other names. So I wanted to see which set of old men talking interested you the most.
No matter who you bring in TNA, unless it's Rock, Goldberg, and Austin in the ring at the same time,
And then Van Damme doesn't run.
you can't compete with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels on TV. That's just absurd. It's something that you think we'd never see. And, reading Ring of Hell and Bret Hart's book, the real history. I could see in Bret Hart's eyes. I was just hoping he'd just punch him in the face. Shawn Michaels was a prick on TV, a prick to Bret Hart's face. But just the whole segment in general was way better than anything TNA did.
Yeah, I agree also with that. TNA can't compete with that. You're talking about the biggest angle ever to really happen in wrestling with Bret and Shawn.
Yeah.
We're going to get closure, 12 and a half years later and on free television. This is unbelievable.
I just didn't like the very ending with him and Vince.
Well, the whole point is to set up their match, of course. The Shawn Michaels stuff, for business, it was the smartest thing to do because they're in a situation where Bret has been gone 12 years. No one's going to want to boo him. Michaels is a face, one of the most over money-drawing faces in the company. So the bad part is he's the heel in the situation for real. I think that was the best resolution they could have.
Well, he did get some heel heat.
Sure.
They were chanting, "You screwed Bret" at one point.
Yeah.
But I think to wrap it up and move on to the Vince McMahon stuff, and I guess split it up so you have something to look forward to later in the night was smart to do. But which one between Hogan and the NWO stuff and Bret Hart and the Michaels McMahon stuff, which one made you want to see what happens next the most?
The NWO Hogan stuff. It was just interesting just to see him in TNA.
You got to go with that.
TNA, at least matches just got better and better. And then that main event was just over the top. Like, you can't top a main event like that with Kurt Angle and AJ Styles.
Yeah.
Best two in the wrestling industry right now.
They should have
You guys
advertised
can't
that more, though. I thought, you knew you were going up against another Bret Hart segment. This is a big deal for Raw to have, and they didn't even advertise a main event for
That's
the
why
show.
they did their pay-per-view main event on TV. They said, you know what, we got to do it.
It seems like WCW booking on the fly.
Well,
That took 6 weeks to write. What are you talking about?
And then we watched it 50
But
times.
comparing the two segments, the Bret Hart Michaels stuff is more of a closure as to leaving something opening, where the NWO segment left things more in the open. So as far as seeing what's next, I would say the NWO segment, because seeing all of them in the ring and then Sting in the rafters, which is, we've never seen that before, right?
At least with the Michaels angle, and I don't think there was any other way around it, they had to kind of blow their wad with that, whereas McMahon is obviously leading to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
However, of course, all that segment really needs is Bret punching McMahon and it's over. So I'm not necessarily sold on whatever bad street fight non-match they're going to do at WrestleMania. Whereas the NWO segment, the band. With Hogan, at first I was thinking this is so cheesy. It's the same 4 or 5 guys doing the same 4 or 5 things that's been done 3, 4, 5 times in WCW, in WWE, blah, blah, blah. However, at the end of the night, when Foley got into Bischoff's office, I was intrigued by that. The whole thing of if Hogan is approving of this, the band beating up Foley, is what's Bischoff's role in this? Are they his cronies? Where's this going to go? And of course, it's leading to a Foley-Hogan feud, which I find personally exciting because that's a match we never got to see and I always wanted to.
Right.
I just got goosebumps when I heard Cactus saying, "Hogan, where is he?" I was like, cool, Cactus and Hogan. And I'm interested to see where that goes. And hopefully you're interested to see where this goes, because coming up next, more talk about the Monday Night War of January 4th.
On February 6th at the Las Vegas Hilton, don't miss Total Extreme Comedy starring New York Times bestseller and multi-time World Wrestling Champion Mick Foley.
I have a secret weapon because I'm gonna talk about my tonight.
Joining Mick on this night of pro wrestling comedy are brother Bruce Pritchard and Colt Boom Boom Cabana.
Jim Ross is doing play-by-play to my porn.
Proceeds from this event will benefit the Nevada chapter of Best Buddies.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Joining us here on the panel to my right, which is your left, is Tim Conley. He watched the Monday Night War with us. He's been a fan of 13 years. What'd you think of the shows, Tim, overall?
When it comes down to the drama aspect of the shows, I think Raw wins. overall.
Well,
because
you can't beat
You can't beat that. When somebody's been out of the game as long as Bret Hart is, and you have people from TNA popping in and out, I literally just saw them like a year or two ago. But Bret Hart, he hasn't been on the scene in a while. Everybody was going nuts. You're in awe. You're like, Bret Hart's back. This is true. This is real. It's no more Vince McMahon faking you out.
Well, this is the big thing they've been wanting to do for years, and they finally got to do it. However, it seemed like they were kind of resting on their laurels as far as TNA went. You wrote a column on WrestlingRoundtable.com about how TNA really needs to step up. This needs to be their shot. And ratings-wise, of course, they couldn't compete with Raw, but they did much better than they ever have on Thursday nights. They did their biggest rating ever, Hogan. It was a success. They were happy with how it went, and there's been some good buzz and some feedback about it, which, of course, they've kind of let squander since then. Big surprise. But do you think WWE took TNA too lightly?
Not at all, because they knew that TNA was going to get over it too. No matter who they bring in, they're not going to get over a 2.0 because you had the name Monday Night Raw. Always. For they've owned Monday nights besides NFL. There's a lot of things about the show they need to change. Even though TNA did bring back some people, it was the way, like the Jeff Hardy stuff was a little bit awkward. Flair just walked out and didn't even speak the whole show. And like Val Venus is in this segment. It was almost too much. Almost became comical.
If you're going to bring Jeff Hardy out, even if it's a short-term deal, you save him for the main event. And then at Genesis, you have him put over AJ Styles. You're talking about a guy that was just a champion as he left WWE. We don't know how long he's going to be around. He ran out of the crowd and hit Homicide with a chair, and that was it. And then he was painting.
During the shows, the crowd, who needs Bret, who needs Bret? It seems like the TNA crowd was more into the show than the Raw crowd.
Oh, they usually are, though.
Because they knew this was like something special for TNA.
You're also talking about a smaller crowd. They're usually smarter fans.
They still need a lot of work. As good as they did that night, they still need a lot of work.
But the rating for Raw remained unchanged. They were expecting to do about a 4, which I was too. With Bret Hart's comeback, it was a big deal. They did a 3.6, which they did the week before. The demographics were up huge, where it was males 18 to 34, 48% watched more than have watched in years this night of wrestling.
So where did all the other fans go?
We may be detracting it somewhat, but there's been a lot of buzz about how well it went for TNA, and I think WWE clearly took notice. I don't think in a wrestling sense that TNA lost to Raw by far, certainly not. And you just mentioned how hot the crowd was for AJ and Kurt Angle. When I saw AJ's wrestling Kurt Angle, obviously you know it's going to be a good match, but the crowd was so enthusiastic for it. You flip to Kofi and Orton and people are sitting on their hands between high spots. It's like, I don't want to watch this shit, even if it's 10 times the audience.
There was always something exciting going on during the match, just like a better wrestling match.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of what they sold themselves on. We know we've got these guys who can have a blow-away match, and wrestling didn't exactly rule the day on Monday. Wrestling matches lost viewers, like the Knockouts tag title match lost 800,000 viewers, even though it was a fine match.
Usually the Knockouts numbers go up.
Right. But in this case, we wanted to see who from 12 years ago was going to talk and be more interesting, and obviously McMahon and Bret was being saved for the overrun of the night to be able to do that. But TNA seemed on a high all week. There was buzz immediately about whether they were going to move to Monday nights permanently. It doesn't seem set in stone, of course. They're still talking about specials, which I think is a mistake. You need to go.
You have to be consistent.
Right.
If you want to play this game, you don't once a month. No, it's every single week.
Yeah, you guys strike when the iron's hot.
It's sink or swim for them now. They've invested way too much money in these people.
So everyone pretty much agrees they should go to Monday nights.
Yep.
Fuck it.
Live.
Go
you have to go live.
And Spike's got to go along with it, too.
Go 8 to 10 at least. Even if you're not going to go directly against Raw, you'll have that hour advantage. Go 8 to 10.
And then with your peaking at 9 o'clock.
So did TNA accomplish their goal of shooting a missile at WWE, or at least making themselves heard?
I've read a lot of people said it was like throwing water balloons at a tank. I can't agree with that. I'd say they did make a mark. They're on the radar. Mm-hmm. They're definitely on the radar. They didn't make an impact, though.
Maybe they didn't do the 2.0 that Hogan was projecting.
I don't think internally anyone thought they would do that well either.
Hogan
But, you know,
things.
even if they got one fan to switch from Raw to TNA, that to me would be accomplishing your mission. They got people interested to see where they're going from here.
It was a success if they kept their viewers from switching over to Raw.
Didn't quite happen. The rating kept going down every
after
hour.
the Hogan peaked, and it was.
But I
down
think
from there.
as long as somebody was watching, it was better that you had people switching back and forth and actually watching your show.
TNA was real smart with buying all that ad time and saying, "Hey brother, why aren't you watching TNA right now?" during Raw's commercials. That was pretty fucking smart.
Yeah.
But another thing also, switching back and forth, I got to see the Pope gimmick for the first time.
That's what they've struck gold with. It. WWE dropped the ball with Elijah Burke, and now TNA is going to reap the benefits of this guy. He's great.
Well, of course, Hornswoggle was on doing fucking dancing and stupid shit on Raw. I am not watching the midget. Switch, Nigel and, Desmond had Pope, D'Angelo, De Niro in a couple-minute-long match. People were complaining about that. He was main eventing against Angle. Now he only gets a couple minutes on TV.
He also beat Samoa Joe this week. They don't know what to do with him yet.
But Nitro also used to have few-minute-long cruiserweight matches, but this is before Russo really killed the time in wrestling on Monday nights.
Yeah.
And people weren't complaining then because they made the most of those 4 minutes or whatever it was they got. And I thought Pope and Nigel was a pretty good match. And not only that, the promo beforehand, I thought this guy is great. I was glad to see it. And when that whole thing was over, switch back, midget was still dancing around. But there's going to be no midgets dancing here on the Wrestling Roundtable because coming up next, the best and worst gimmick matches.
Am I the only one that hates that Pope character?
You don't like it?
I fucking hate it.
I'd
rather watch Jeff Jarrett, I think.
I thought it was awesome.
I think he's great. I think
Pope has spoken.
my Pope. Call me my Pope.
I hate it.
One thing that nobody mentioned was the fact that they never even advertised their Thursday show.
Yeah.
Shit.
I was going to bring that up, but we moved on.
It was too quick to.
Because when you said, like, strike while the iron is hot and keep it going, and, like, for next Monday or this and that, I'm like, fuck, next Monday. They got next Thursday. They got next Sunday. They have all this shit that they never plugged.
Well, they'll plug in a Genesis pay-per-view pretty hard.
Yeah, they were.
I don't
They were
know
plugging
why.
pay-per-view all the time.
I don't
They
know
really
why
could.
when they taped on Tuesday they just didn't just go live or put a new show on Thursday again.
Right.
They need a different venue.